Hi Ryan, it's really like this film. It's an engrossing documentary. Now you've got Steven Spielberg's own production company involved in this. You've got special effects giants ILM involved too. How did you get those on board?
I'm still asking myself that question. No, two of my filmmaking heroes. So one came to me and I came to the other. So Spielberg's company brought me this idea for a film. They had gotten access to NASA, and NASA had almost 1,000 hours of footage from Opportunity and Spirit's lifetimes. And NASA felt comfortable partnering with Amblin and knowing that Amblin would take good care of this story. And so Amblin actually approached me about making the film and thought I might be a great fit. And at that initial dinner when we were talking about the film, I asked Amblin, I said, if we're going to do this film, or at least if I'm going to direct it, can we take the audience to Mars in a way that's never been done before in film or television? Can we create a photoreal Mars based on the hundreds of thousands of photographs we have of these journeys? We know what it looked like. We just need to bring it to life. And they said, we don't know, but our best friends are over Industrial Light and Magic. You should talk to them. And they weren't the only visual effects house that I spoke to, but they were one that really savored the challenge of doing something they had never done before. They had created Mars, of course, but that Mars wasn't photoreal. It was based on, maybe an actor in a desert in Nevada or Utah. And this was asking them to build something from the ground up, which was a ton of work, which would take a couple years. But they said, we're up for the challenge. Like we can achieve that. And so that was the beginning of the process of working with Industrial Light and Magic, and it wasn't until the end, when we were finishing the film at the end of 2021, that you really get to see that world fully come to life. It is a long process.
Now the photorealism of the footage that ILM have created for this is it's astonishing. It really is. But I gather that even with their genius behind it, they had issues recreating the rovers interacting with the elements on Mars. Is that right?
It was the more challenging shots, and they let me know this from the beginning. The most challenging shots in the type of world that we are talking about, they're not like the action scenes, like the landing scene, which was very complicated, but you would think because there's so much fast movement throughout it, that it would be the most difficult. The most difficult, they kept explaining to me, would be any interaction between the wheel and the sand on Mars. And that's because the sand on Mars is not like sand here. It's much finer and granular. So it's often likened to cake flour or talcum powder. So for them to realistically have wheel sand interaction, it was going to be thousands, if not millions, of particles that you had to be showing. So by far the most complicated scene in our film is what we call the quicksand scene, where Opportunity is virtually burying herself in the sand because her wheels won't stop turning. And that scene was probably the longest from beginning till end to finish.
Now, one of the things that I noticed about this is that fiction films often present scientists as quite cold people, but in this they're very warm. There's a lot of empathy to be had with them, and the thing that really struck me was the use of music and their love of pop and rock as wake-up calls. Can you tell me about the use of music in the film?
Yeah, so we have 7 amazing songs in our film. I didn't pick those songs. Those were songs that were inherent to a scene. So it is a tradition throughout human spaceflight, where mission control would often wake up human astronauts with a song, to play to that spaceship, or whatever that craft was at the time, and then this mission decided to extrapolate that same sort of tradition. Like, the only difference is that it's not to humans, it's to a robot, as a way to wake the robot up on the morning of every day on its mission. And so The missions were only supposed to last for 90 days, 2 rovers, that would be 180 songs. Instead, both of these rovers lasted for many years, so there were thousands of wake up songs played over the course of those many years. So one of the most difficult parts of making the film was deciding which songs to actually pick. And in the end, they were all chosen because they were played at an amazing moment that was going to make the final cut of the film, whether that's Opportunity getting stuck in quicksand when they were playing Walking on Sunshine, or Here Comes the Sun when they had survived a winter and a dust storm. All of them were picked because they were played in a scene in Mission Control. The only one being B-52's Rome, which is in our opening scene, where I got to pick any song from the Wake Up songs because it was more of a montage of Opportunity's life, and we're only showing Mars. We're not showing anything from Mission Control in the open to our film. And we auditioned so many songs, so many great songs. And Rome felt like it captured the audience in that first minute in a way that the other ones didn't.
It's a good choice.
Thank you.
NASA are renowned for documenting everything, and as you've alluded to earlier, you must have had thousands of hours to go through. Was there any footage that you would have liked to have used but just couldn't be incorporated into the documentary that really surprised you?
Oh, loads of time there was footage that couldn't be used because you had to check a lot of boxes for a scene in this film to make it into the documentary. Usually you had to have some sort of incredible scene on Mars that Industrial Light would be creating, and then you had to have incredible interviewees being able to tell you that story, and then you had to be able to find archival, for the most part, of how that went down in Mission Control. So many times we would find incredible moments in archival. You might not even know what it is, but something really dramatic happening, and then try to figure out, okay, well, what soul number did that happen on? And go into what's called the analyst notebook, which is what Angela Bassett is reading in our documentary, and not be able to figure out because none of the scientists or engineers in the story, you know, they're recounting things sometimes from 15, 16 years ago, and they don't remember what that event was. So there was lots of moments that ended up on the cutting room floor because they didn't check all of those boxes. There were also scenes that we heard about a lot but didn't make the film because we couldn't find it in the archival. Like, a good example of this was a story that people at NASA often refer to as Y2K, because the robots were only supposed to live 90 days. Their computers were only engineered in a way where the highest number of souls that they could get up to was 999, and then they would click back to 000. So when they were going from soul 999 to soul 1000, there was this major panic in Mission Control that the robots were just going to a panic and break. And so they had to do like an emergency software reboot on the rovers to update their computers so that they could go to 4 digits. It was an amazing story. It involves a power outage during a lightning storm at JPL. Someone had to run. They found like a floppy disk from the 90s, and it was the floppy disk that allowed them to upload the software at like the very last second before the robots fizzled out. And we just there was no cameras there when it happened. So no matter how dramatic that story was telling, there were no visuals, and so we couldn't include it. It would make for like a great DVD extra if those still existed.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Ryan. It's a great documentary. I very much enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Nice to meet you.